3 years is long enough to stop noticing things. Long enough to stop noticing that you check someone's mood before you say hello, that you calculate your route home based on whether he's eaten, that your stomach tightens every time your phone lights up with his name. I worked at Montero Capital Group as a senior financial analyst. Had for almost 2.5 years. The office was on the 23rd floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago, the kind of view that makes you feel like the city belongs to you if you look at it long enough. I loved the work, the precision of it, the way numbers told the truth even when people didn't. I was good at it. Good enough that Mr. Montero himself had twice come to my desk to review quarterly reports in person, which wasn't something he did with everyone. I knew what he was, or at least I knew the version of it that circulated in the city's quieter conversations. Gail Montero ran a legitimate empire, commercial properties, residential development, investment holdings across the Midwest. But there were layers to it that nobody spoke about directly. Certain clients whose money arrived too clean. Certain associates who didn't look like real estate men. I chose not to look too hard at any of that. The work itself was honest, the paycheck was steady, and I needed both. Shane had been making noise all day. It started at 9 in the morning, with "Who's the guy in the gray suit you talked to in the lobby?" and escalated from there. By noon it was "You didn't answer my call." Why didn't you answer? By 3 it was just a string of red receipts stacking up while I tried to finish a property valuation report, due by end of day. I typed my responses between paragraphs, careful and neutral the way I'd learned to be. A client I was presenting, I didn't have my phone on me. All true, all inadequate. Shane played guitar, beautifully, actually, when he was happy and loose and hadn't had anything to drink. That was who I'd fallen for 3 years ago. The guy who could make a whole bar go quiet just by pulling out a chord progression he'd written in someone's living room at 2 in the morning. Somewhere in the middle of that time, he'd stopped being that person. The gigs dried up, the bookings fell off, and what grew in the space that left behind was a kind of jealousy I didn't have a word for yet. Methodical. Consuming. I'd put my location on my phone because he said it was for safety. I'd stopped going to happy hours because it made things easier. I'd stopped talking to my friend Marisol, who worked 2 floors below me and used to make me laugh until my mascara ran, because Shane said she seemed like trouble. I hadn't drawn anything in 14 months. It was past 6 when Mr. Montero appeared in the doorway of his office. He had a way of moving through spaces that I'd never quite gotten used to. Quiet for someone his size, always aware of the room before the room was aware of him. Dark suit, no tie, his sleeves pushed up to his forearms the way they were, when he'd been working long hours without stopping to think about it. "You're still here," he said, not a question. Wrapping up the Patterson report. I didn't look up from my screen. 20 minutes. He didn't leave. I could feel him standing there the way you feel weather changing, a pressure shift, something in the air. My phone buzzed against my desk for the 4th time in the past hour. I watched his gaze drop to it, then come back to me. Adriana. Something about the way he said my name, unhurried, 4 syllables given the same careful weight, made me look up. His expression gave nothing away. It rarely did. But his eyes did what his face wouldn't. And right now they were reading something I didn't want to acknowledge. "I'm fine," I said. "I know you believe that." He straightened. "Go home. The Patterson report can wait until morning." A pause at his office door. "And if you ever need anything at all, you call me, day or night. You have my number." I'd saved it 18 months ago after a security incident in the building. I'd never used it. "Thank you, Mr. Montero," I said, "really, but I'm okay." He didn't look convinced. He went back to his office, and I went back to my screen, and neither of us said what we were actually thinking. Shane's car was in the lot when I got home to our apartment in Wicker Park. The lights were off except in the kitchen. That was never a good sign. He was sitting at the table in the dark with his guitar case open in front of him, not playing, just staring at it. 3 empty beer bottles on the counter. I counted them the way I counted everything lately, automatically, without meaning to. "Hey," I kept my voice level. "I texted you when I was leaving." Who was the guy? What guy? "The lobby this morning. Don't say a client." I set my bag down slowly. Shane, I talk to 30 people a day. I genuinely don't know who you mean. He stood up. Don't make me feel stupid. I'm not. You smiled at him. You touched your hair. You think I don't notice these things? His voice climbed in that particular way, the one that had a ceiling I hadn't found yet. I notice everything, Adriana. I touch my hair because it falls in my face. I kept my voice flat, practiced. That's it. That's all of it. You're lying. The word landed wrong. It always landed wrong, because it was never true, and he never cared. I turned toward the hallway. I'm going to take a shower and go to sleep. I have an early call tomorrow. I heard him before I felt him. The scrape of the chair, footsteps too fast across the linoleum, and then his hand closed around my wrist and pulled me backward hard enough that my shoulder hit the doorframe. Don't walk away from me when I'm talking to you. Shane. Look at me. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the beer on him, sour and close. Say there's nothing going on. Say it like you mean it. Let go of my wrist, steadier than I felt. You're hurting me. His other hand came up and I twisted to pull away, and somewhere in the motion his hand caught the side of my face. Not a full swing. Enough to snap my head sideways, enough to make my ear ring, enough to stop both of us completely still. I pressed my palm to my cheekbone. I looked at him. He stared back at me, and I watched the anger drain out of his face in real time, replaced by something that might have been horror in another version of events. But I wasn't interested in his horror. I was looking at the line we'd just crossed and understanding, with a clarity that felt almost chemical, that I would not go back over it with him. Adriana, he reached for me. Don't. I didn't mean to. Get out. Completely calm. Calmer than anything I'd felt in months. Right now, or I'm calling 911. He grabbed his keys, his jacket. He said through the closing door that we'd talk tomorrow, that I'd see this differently, that we were good together, and he loved me. The door shut. I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. My wrists were already marking up, dark pressure lines from his grip. My cheek throbbed with each heartbeat. I sat there listening to the apartment settle into its nighttime sounds. Then I picked up my phone, and I scrolled until I found the number I'd saved 18 months ago, and never touched. It rang twice. Adriana. Mr. Montero's voice came through even and alert, no sleep fog in it. What's wrong? Just hearing it broke something loose in my chest. I pressed my hand over my mouth for a second. I'm sorry to call this late, I started. I didn't know who else to. Can you please come get me? I can't stay here tonight. Silence, one beat, two. Where are you? My apartment, Wicker Park, but Shane might come back and I. Lock your door. His voice shifted, lower, harder, something underneath it that I registered in my chest before my brain caught up. Deadbolt and chain. I'm 20 minutes away. Stay on the phone. I locked everything with shaking hands. He talked me through it. Windows, the back door, where to sit. He didn't press for details. He didn't ask questions I couldn't answer yet. He just kept his voice even and close, and I kept breathing. And when the knock finally came, I already knew who it was. I looked through the peephole anyway. Gail Montero in a black jacket over a gray shirt, his hair slightly disordered, a man I recognized from the building, positioned silently to his left facing the hallway. I opened the door. His eyes went to my wrists first, then my face. Something moved through his expression and was gone in a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Grab what you need, he said quietly. You're not staying here tonight. His penthouse was in the Gold Coast. I'd known he was wealthy the way you know things about people you work for, abstractly. Standing in his living room at 10 at night, with a bag over my shoulder and ice pressed against my cheekbone made it real. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the lake a black plain to the east, the city stacked in grids of light below us. A doctor arrived within the hour, a composed woman he called without explanation, who examined me with clinical gentleness and didn't push for any decision I wasn't ready to make. No fractures. Significant bruising to both wrists. She left me with an ice pack, something for pain and instructions I was too tired to fully process. Afterward, Gale was at the windows with a glass of whiskey, his back to me. He'd changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, and I'd only ever seen him in suits. and the ordinary humanness of it was somehow the detail that undid me more than anything else that night. "You don't have to explain anything tonight," he said without turning. "You don't have to decide anything. Sleep." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. It came out smaller than I intended. He turned then, looked at me across the room the same way he'd looked at me in the office doorway hours ago, unhurried, taking in more than I'd given. "Because you called," he said. "Go to sleep, Adriana." I checked my bank account in the morning out of habit. The balance in the joint account Shane had suggested we open a year ago, it just makes managing bills easier, Adriana, was $47. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and read that number 3 times. I'd deposited $2,800 from my paycheck 9 days ago. The week before that, another deposit. I scrolled back through the transaction history and watched my money leave in withdrawals I hadn't made, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, cash advances from ATMs, in neighborhoods I'd never been to. I opened my credit report next. I checked it twice a year. Everything had been clean in March. 2 credit cards I hadn't opened. A personal loan for $18,000 with a lender in Arizona I'd never heard of. A second loan for $5,900 60 days past due. My credit score, which I had spent years building by paying everything on time and keeping my utilization low, because I understood how these systems worked and I took them seriously. It had collapsed. I called Gail before I'd finished processing what I was looking at. He answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" "He stole from me," I said. My voice was very steady. "Shane, he's been using my identity to open accounts, take out loans. I just pulled my credit report. There's almost $25,000 in debt I never authorized." Silence. "Then I'm coming back. Don't touch anything. Don't transfer funds. Don't close accounts. Don't contact the lenders. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He came back. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with my phone between us and went through every transaction without speaking. His expression stayed level. The only thing that changed was his hands. The way they stilled entirely at a certain point, the way absolute stillness in a person who is normally controlled can communicate more than any visible reaction. "This is prosecutable," he said. "Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. We file a police report. We retain an attorney today. He'll say I authorized everything." "Did you sign those loan applications?" "No." "Then we prove you didn't. IP addresses on the digital applications, timestamps cross-referenced with your location data, handwriting comparison on anything with a physical signature." He held my gaze. "Fraud leaves a trail always. We follow it." We, that word. "I want to build the case myself," I said. "I don't want to hand this off and wait. I want to be the one who puts it together." Something in his eyes shifted. Approval, maybe. Or recognition of something he'd been waiting to see. "I know a fraud investigator," he said. "The best in Chicago at documentation. You'll work with him directly. Every piece of evidence goes through you first." The months that followed were the hardest and most clarifying of my life, and I mean both things equally. I filed the police report 6 days after leaving the apartment. I wanted documentation in hand before I sat down with a detective, wanted to walk in knowing more than I'd be asked. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Paulson, who took notes like a forensic accountant, interested in patterns more than drama, which suited me fine. I gave her patterns. The fraud investigator's name was Dalton. Tired-eyed, deeply skeptical, operated on black coffee and professional disbelief. He sat across from me in a Montero Capitol conference room 6 weeks later and looked at the timeline I'd assembled. Every loan application, every unauthorized inquiry, every withdrawal mapped against my phone's location data, proving I'd been somewhere else. My work calendar, showing I'd been in client presentations at the exact timestamps the online applications had been submitted. And he said, with the particular reluctance of someone who doesn't give out compliments easily, that I'd done his job for him. I'd learned from numbers. Numbers tell the truth if you ask them the right questions. I moved out of the penthouse after 3 weeks and into a studio in Lincoln Park that was small and quiet and entirely mine. Gail had not once suggested I stay longer than I wanted to. He arranged movers when I was ready. His housekeeper stocked my refrigerator on move-in day. Just the basics, coffee and eggs and bread. without being asked and without making it a conversation. We had coffee most mornings. His office or the kitchen on our floor. We talked about the case, about the city, about things that had nothing to do with either. A documentary about Chicago architecture led somehow to me telling him I'd wanted to be an architect before I understood I was better with the financial side of buildings than the structural side, that I'd kept sketchbooks for years. Facades, interiors, the way light moves through a particular kind of window. Until Shane told me I was wasting time on something I'd never be good at. Gail was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's a drafting table in the storage room on this floor. It's been sitting there since before I bought the firm. You could use it." "That's not necessary. You had a life before him, not unkindly, plainly. Don't let him take the parts he didn't get to ruin." I set up the drafting table that weekend. I drew until 2 in the morning and felt, for the first time in over a year, like I was home in my own body. The grand jury indicted Shane on 6 counts 8 weeks after I filed the police report, 2 counts of identity theft, 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of forgery. Bail set at $40,000, which his parents paid. Passport surrendered, weekly check-ins with a supervision officer. I signed the lease extension on my Lincoln Park studio. The same afternoon the indictment came through. The trial started on a Tuesday in October. I sat in the witness box and told the truth the way I'd learned to tell everything. Precisely, without excess, letting the evidence carry the weight. The prosecutor walked me through the documentation methodically. Dalton testified about the handwriting analysis. A digital forensics expert testified about the IP addresses. Shane's attorney tried to suggest I was a woman manufacturing accusations out of grievance. Tried to imply the loan applications were ambiguous, that the distinction between my signature and the forged ones wasn't clear enough to be certain. The handwriting expert spent 38 minutes explaining exactly why it was. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 50 minutes, guilty on all 6 counts. I walked out of the courthouse into cold October sunlight and stood on the steps for a moment and breathed. The city was doing its normal Tuesday thing. Cabs, pedestrians, the distant clatter of the L, entirely indifferent to the fact that something in my life had just ended. Gale was parked at the curb. I hadn't asked him to be. He was there. I walked over. He looked at me through the open window. "Guilty," I said, "all 6 counts." He didn't say "I told you so." He didn't say anything that required a response. "Get in," he said. "Let's get lunch." The months after the trial moved differently than the months before. Sentencing came through. 4 to 7 years. The fraudulent debts were ruled legally invalid, obtained through identity theft, and began the slow process of being removed from my credit report one by one. My score climbed back toward where it had been, then past it, because I was meticulous, and I understood credit, and I refused to let his destruction of it be permanent. I received a promotion, Director of Financial Operations, a title I'd been building toward since my first year at the firm. Gale told me, over morning coffee, that he'd planned to offer it 6 months earlier, but had waited because he'd wanted there to be no room for anyone, including me, to question whether I'd earned it on the merits. "And," I said. "You've removed all possible doubt," he said. Marisol, who I'd started actually having lunch with again, texted me 3 exclamation points when I told her. Then she said also, "I've been watching your boss watch you for 2 years and I have questions." I told her it was complicated. She said nothing about Gale. Montero looked complicated. It looked like someone who'd already made up his mind and was waiting for me to catch up. She wasn't wrong. It happened slowly, which was the only way it could have happened. A conversation that ran past where it needed to stop, and neither of us ended it. A joke that sat warm between us for the rest of the morning. The evening he asked what I'd been working on, and I showed him a sketch. The view from his office windows, the lake in late November, the light coming in flat and gray, and specific to that particular hour, and he looked at it without speaking for long enough that I started to feel self-conscious. And when he looked up, he called me Karita for the first time. "Darling," I looked it up. I didn't say anything. He didn't explain. It became simply the word he used for me. "I need you to know something," he said to me one morning, leaning forward with his hands around his coffee cup, looking at me with the directness that had always been the most disarming thing about him. Whatever I feel about you, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't what it is, it doesn't change anything about your position here, your promotion, any of it. Those were already decided. You should know that. I know, I said. You're sure? Gale. I said his name, not his title, for the first time on purpose. I've been watching you for 2 years too. I know the difference between what I earned and what I was given. You're not someone who gives things away. Something in his expression shifted. No, he said, I'm not. I took a solo trip to a small lake town in Michigan in April, 2 nights, a rental cabin, a sketchbook, the particular quiet of a place that doesn't know you. I sat on the dock in the evening and drew the tree line on the far shore, with the water going gold underneath it, and felt, with a simplicity that was entirely new, like myself. I texted Gale a photo of the sketch. His response came quickly. Beautiful. Safe drive back, Karita. 3 words and I was smiling at my phone on a dock in the middle of nowhere, like a person with very little dignity. I took a photo of the dock as well, the water, the last of the light, and sent that too. He called instead of texting back. We talked for 2 hours, about the town, about the drive up, about a development project he was navigating, and a client who was being difficult, and the precise way he described the situation made me laugh in the dark of the cabin, about his family, the parts he shared carefully, the history that had made him who he was, the parts of his life that weren't safe or simple or something I could look at too directly. He was honest about all of it. He'd always been honest about all of it. It was the thing I'd needed most and hadn't known it. After 3 years of a man who lied in the direction of what I wanted to hear, honesty, even about complicated things, especially about complicated things, felt like standing in clean air. When we hung up, I sat in the dark of the cabin for a while, feeling, cleanly and without any complication underneath it, like someone who had figured something out. The proposal happened on an ordinary Wednesday morning. Not staged, not planned looking. We were in the kitchen of his penthouse. I was there because I'd stayed the night, which had become a thing that happened naturally, and without requiring discussion. And I was making coffee, and he was reading something on his phone, and it was the kind of morning that felt so unremarkably good that I registered it consciously. Pay attention to this. This is what it's supposed to feel like. I turned around and he was already looking at me. I have something, he said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. It was barely 7:30. He hadn't even put it on yet. It was draped over the back of a chair and set a small dark box on the counter between us. I didn't say anything. My brain and my mouth stopped cooperating. He opened it. A deep blue sapphire, simple gold setting, clean and extraordinary, and nothing like what I would have designed for myself if asked, and somehow completely right. I have been paying close attention to you for 2.5 years, he said. I watched you work, and I watched you fight, and I watched you put yourself back together, piece by piece, after someone did his best to make sure you couldn't. I am not a simple man, and my life is not a simple life, and you know both of those things. He paused. You know them, and you're still here, which tells me everything I need to know about who you are. I would very much like you to stay, permanently. Will you marry me? I set down my coffee mug. Yes, I said, obviously yes. He was actually smiling when he slid the ring onto my finger. Not the measured warmth that usually stood in for it, but something wider and a little unguarded, a version of his face I'd only seen a few times before and intended to see every day going forward. Obviously, he repeated. You've been paying attention for 2.5 years. I've been paying attention just as long. I looked down at the ring, at the deep blue of it, catching the morning light. Yes was always going to be the answer. I just needed to be the one who got there on my own. He pulled me in and kissed me in the middle of his kitchen at 7:30 on a Wednesday morning. And the lake was gray outside the windows, and the coffee was getting cold, and the city was already doing its thing, enormous and indifferent, and entirely beautiful. I thought about the woman who'd sat on her kitchen floor 8 months ago, with bruised wrists and no plan, and the number of a man she'd never called. I thought about how calling that number had been the first decision I'd made entirely for myself in 3 years. and how every decision after it had been the same way. 3 years is long enough to stop noticing things. It is also long enough to learn how to start again.